Elias Vance valued his privacy the way a desert nomad valued water. His property, a quarter-acre slice of suburban quiet, was his fortress, especially the backyard. The meticulously maintained saltwater pool shimmered under the late June sun, guarded by a 6-foot cedar fence that had been the primary battlefield in his undeclared war with his neighbor. Carol Jenkins, Carol, in her mid-50s, was a monument to entitled exasperation. She operated under the firm belief that the world was an organized conspiracy against her personal comfort, and Elias's fence was its chief architectural flaw. She claimed it was 3 inches over the true property line, a claim Elias had repeatedly and expensively refuted with stamped surveys. Still, the daily passive-aggressive assaults continued. A misplaced wheelbarrow, fertilizer deliberately spilled near the cedar boards, and most recently, a note taped to the post reading, in harsh red marker, "This is an obstruction. I will have access." Elias, sitting on his deck drinking iced coffee, had dismissed the note as just another predictable escalation in Carol's personal drama. But that afternoon, something felt different. The air was heavy, not just with humidity, but with a palpable tension. He worked from home, a software architect who rarely had to leave his sanctuary, but today his concentration was shot. He kept glancing at the fence, at the line where his peace ended and Carol's chaos began. He'd installed the security cameras himself, a $5,000 system covering every angle of the perimeter. He hadn't done it for theft. He'd done it for Carol. He knew she was capable of anything short of arson, and he needed proof. Every evening he checked the logs, a ritual of defensive paranoia. Suddenly, a sharp cracking sound tore through the quiet, followed by the distinctive high-pitched scrape of wood ripping against metal. Elias bolted out of his chair, the iced coffee cup clattering onto the deck. "What the hell?" he muttered, sprinting across the perfectly manicured lawn toward the back corner of the yard. What he saw stopped him cold. The cedar fence, his solid, unyielding barrier, had been breached. 2 boards, freshly ripped from the post, lay splintered on the immaculate pool deck. And standing in the gap, half in shadow and half bathed in the oppressive sunlight, was Carol. She was wearing a loud, brightly colored floral shift, her face contorted in a mask of determined fury. In her hand she held a rusty pair of hedge trimmers, the tool of her destructive entry. "I told you, Elias, this fence is infringing on my sunlight," she screeched, her voice vibrating with manic certainty. "I have a right to—" Elias didn't wait for her to finish. "You psycho! You just destroyed my private property! Get off my land, Carol. Now, I'm calling the police." He reached for his phone, his thumb hovering over the dial pad when the inevitable happened. Carol took a final, furious step onto the deck, her eyes still locked on Elias, her attention miles away from her feet. The pool deck, slick from the pool's minor overflow, offered no purchase. Her worn leather sandals betrayed her. In a moment of physics-defying slapstick that was anything but funny, she slipped. The movement was slow, nauseatingly loud, and horrifically clumsy. The rusty hedge trimmers flew from her grasp and clanged against the decorative stone border. Carol's arms windmilled wildly, her body twisting. There was a hideous, fleshy thwump as her knee struck the pool's concrete lip, and then a massive, sickening splash. She didn't just fall, she disappeared. Elias stood paralyzed for a beat, the phone forgotten in his hand. The splash was still rippling, the silence that followed even more shocking than the sound of the fence breaking. Carol surfaced, sputtering and coughing, her floral dress now clinging, sodden and heavy. She wasn't screaming in pain. She was screaming in rage. You did this!" she gargled, clawing at the pool edge, trying to haul herself onto the deck. "The deck is dangerous. You knew it was wet. I'm going to sue you for everything, you hear me? Everything!" Elias finally moved, adrenaline flooding his system. He tossed his phone onto a deck chair and approached the edge, but not to help. "You trespassed. You broke my fence with a weapon," Elias said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, steady calm that unnerved Carol far more than yelling would have. "Every second of this is on camera, Carol. You fell because you were attacking my property. Don't you dare!" She shrieked, finally managing to pull herself onto the deck, leaning heavily on her left leg, which was visibly trembling. Her knee was already blooming purple beneath the wet fabric. "I'm injured." "I'm calling my lawyer." "Too late," Elias said, retrieving his phone. "I already called the police. And an ambulance." "You're not going anywhere, Carol." Within 10 minutes, the suburb was alight with flashing red and blue. A police cruiser from the 14th precinct pulled up first, followed closely by an ambulance. Carol's husband, Gary, a pale, defeated man who looked like he'd been expecting this moment for 20 years, arrived, frantic, from their own backyard. "What happened, Carol?" "Your knee! Oh, God!" Gary stammered, rushing to her side. Carol latched onto his arm, her eyes burning with righteous victimhood. "He did this, Gary. He deliberately kept his deck dangerous, knowing I had a right to access. I fell right where he was standing. It's negligence. Call Henderson and Sachs. Call them now." Officer Reyes, a young woman with an expression of profound weariness, sighed and surveyed the scene, the splintered fence, the wet, furious woman, the panicked husband, and the calm, stone-faced man pointing to the 3 small dome cameras mounted under his eaves. "Ma'am, we need to get that knee looked at," Reyes said to Carol. "And, sir, I need to see your video footage, please." Elias nodded, leading Reyes toward his house. As the EMTs carefully stabilized Carol's leg and lifted her onto a stretcher, she continued her frantic, booming pronouncements of legal doom. "This is a gold mine, Gary. Premises liability. Trespassing? Nonsense. He obstructed my easement. He'll pay! He'll lose this house!" Gary could only nod weakly, his eyes darting between his wife and the broken fence. Just as the EMTs wheeled Carol and her litany of threats toward the ambulance, Officer Reyes returned from the house, her body camera still recording a faint, almost imperceptible smirk touching the corner of her mouth. She approached the remaining officer, who was waiting by the cruiser, and spoke into her radio, loud enough for Gary and Elias to hear, the words cutting through Carol's departing curses. "Control. Update. We have evidence of felony criminal mischief prior to the fall. The complainant was recorded using hedge trimmers to deliberately break the victim's perimeter fence before entering the property. She was clearly trespassing and initiating property damage. The fall was a direct result of her own actions. I'm requesting an additional unit to secure the fence and will be filing charges for attempted B&E and property damage against Carol Jenkins, pending medical release." Gary, leaning over the stretcher, went instantly pale, dropping his phone. The sirens faded, leaving behind a silence far more charged than before. The suit Carol had promised was coming. Elias knew that. But the first act of the drama had just ended not with a splash, but with the cold, hard click of official recognition. Carol had walked onto his land to start a fight, and instead, the fight had started before she even crossed the line, courtesy of her own recorded evidence. The karma had been swift and crippling. He looked up at the tiny camera lens, a sentinel of silent digital truth, and braced himself for they. The police cruiser was gone. The ambulance sirens were a distant memory, and the only lingering evidence of the chaos was the gaping, ragged hole in Elias Vance's 6-foot cedar fence. Elias stood staring at the damage, not seeing splintered wood, but seeing the gaping hole in his life savings that the promised lawsuit would tear open. Officer Reyes's pronouncement of criminal charges against Carol, felony criminal mischief, had offered a moment of righteous vindication, but it was just a skirmish. The real war, the one over money and property, was just starting. Elias spent the evening methodically reviewing the footage, making redundant copies, and drafting a concise timeline of events. The security video was clinical. Carol, with her hedge trimmers, sawing at the boards, the brief, furious exchange, the clumsy slip, the splash, and the immediate, furious accusation. It was airtight, yet Elias felt a hollow pit in his stomach. Lawyers, he knew, had a way of turning concrete into sand. The next morning, he called David Chen, a sharp, unpretentious attorney recommended by a former colleague. David, mid-40s with a patient, weary demeanor, came to the house that afternoon. He didn't mince words. "The video is gold. Elias, truly. It demolishes any reasonable claim of simple premises liability," David said, watching the slow-motion footage of Carol's fall in Elias's office. She was a trespasser in the act of committing a crime. "We have a powerful defense, But this woman is clearly unhinged, and they're going to sue anyway. Sue on what grounds? Elias demanded, leaning forward. She broke in. She used hedge trimmers. David sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. Premises liability is messy. Her lawyer will argue the deck was an attractive nuisance, your pool, and that you have a duty to maintain a safe environment. Even for trespassers, particularly when there's a known hazard, which, let's be honest, a wet pool deck is. More crucially, they will try to claim that the trespass was a secondary issue and the fall was primarily caused by the negligent maintenance of the deck's surface. Her injury is severe, a shattered patella likely, and that means massive medical bills. She's going to sue for punitive damages, pain and suffering, and the whole suburban package. Expect a 7-figure demand. A cold dread settled over Elias. 7 figures? I'm a software architect, not a millionaire. That's why they do it, to scare you into settling. But we fight. We file a counterclaim immediately for the fence, the criminal mischief, and the harassment. David confirmed. The simultaneous criminal case. That's our secret weapon. It paints her narrative as a lie before the civil jury even hears it. Meanwhile, in her private hospital room, Carol Jenkins was holding court. Her left leg was encased in a massive brace, and her voice, though strained by pain medication, still carried the sharp, entitled edge of grievance. Gary, looking haggard and utterly defeated, stood by the window, avoiding her gaze. "Did you call Brenda Maxwell?" Carol snapped, adjusting her pillows. "I did, Carol. She's expensive," Gary mumbled. He hadn't told her about Officer Reyes's radio call or the official police report stating the criminal mischief charges. The sheer audacity of his wife's victimhood had paralyzed him. "I don't care about expensive. Elias Vance has a huge house, a saltwater pool, and those ridiculous cameras. He's loaded. This is justice, Gary. He built that fence just to spite me, and his sloppy pool deck almost killed me. He's going to pay for this knee, for the trauma, for everything." Brenda Maxwell, a lawyer whose reputation was built on ruthless efficiency and settling cases just shy of trial for maximum payout, arrived an hour later, dressed in a sharp power suit that screamed billable hours. Brenda listened to Carol's tear-streaked, heavily edited version of the events, the sudden pain, the dangerously slick deck, the aggressive fence that obstructed her property rights. The critical point, Carol, is the fall itself, Brenda said, her voice smooth and predatory. "We will concede the fence dispute is civil, but we will make the jury focus on the deck. A pool owner has a heightened duty of care. Was the deck surfaced with non-slip materials? Did it have proper drainage? We shift the focus from why you were there to what caused the injury." "They have video of me breaking the fence," Carol whispered, a rare flicker of fear in her eyes. Brenda smiled, a tight, controlled expression. "We spin that. You were attempting to clear a long-standing disputed obstruction. You were frustrated, yes, but that's human. The fall happened after the initial act, due to an unreasonably dangerous condition, the wet, slick surface, which is a separate act of negligence. The trespass is a fine. The shattered knee is millions. We focus on the millions." Brenda's confidence bolstered Carol, turning her fear back into fury. By the end of the day, a voluminous, professionally intimidating lawsuit was drafted. The next morning, it was served. Elias opened the door to a smug-looking courier who handed him a thick stack of papers. The front page hit him like a physical blow. Carol Jenkins versus Elias Vance. Seeking damages of $2.8 million, he immediately called David. They filed. $2.8 million. "I expected it," David replied calmly. "Now we execute the plan. I want you to go straight to the police station. Get the official police report. I want the arrest warrant for criminal mischief officially filed today. We need to hit them with maximum pressure, and we can't wait for discovery." Elias followed the instructions, walking out of the police station an hour later with a copy of the report that detailed Carol's criminal actions. He felt a sense of control returning. It was clear and damning. Carol was not a victim, but a perp. The two lawyers met for a formal telephone conference later that week, a mandatory preliminary step. Elias sat in David's office watching the exchange unfold through the speakerphone. "Mr. Chen, this is an open and shut premises liability case." Brenda Maxwell's voice was arctic, radiating contempt. Your client was negligent in maintaining a safe surface around an attractive nuisance. My client, despite her frustration over his aggressive boundary violations, suffered a catastrophic injury. Ms. Maxwell. David's voice was gentle, deceptively so. We agree your client suffered an injury, but she suffered it while illegally entering my client's private property and committing felony criminal mischief. I'm looking at the police report right now. The police have filed charges. We have the entire incident on HD video showing the destruction of the fence before the fall. The law is quite clear on trespassers who are simultaneously criminals. Brenda paused, a slight, almost inaudible catch in her breath. She recovered quickly. The criminal matter is completely separate from the civil liability for the hazardous property condition. We can spend years debating the fence, or we can settle this now, before we drag your client's entire financial life through the mud. No settlement, David stated, the gentleness gone, replaced by steel. Furthermore, before discovery even begins, we are filing an emergency civil injunction. Given the ongoing pattern of harassment, the deliberate destruction of private property, and the clear security risk, we are asking the court to compel your client to pay for the immediate repair of the fence and award punitive damages for harassment. If she is so injured she requires $2.8 million, she cannot, in good conscience, ignore the $5,000 in property damage and the cost of the security upgrades she forced. We will not proceed with the main suit until that injunction is heard and satisfied. The speakerphone was silent for a full 10 seconds. Brenda Maxwell, the shark, had just been blindsided by a tactical legal stroke. For Carol, the $1 million payoff had been the prize. Forcing her to spend money to pay for the fence before she could collect was a financial chokehold. You can't file an injunction on a matter of property damage while a major tort claim is pending, Brenda finally sputtered, her professional facade cracking. I just did, David said, clipping the words short. See you in court, counselor. He hung up. Elias stared at his lawyer, his heart pounding. What happens now? David leaned back in his chair, a genuine satisfied smile finally reaching his eyes. Now we make them pay to play. Carol Jenkins wants to sue us for millions? Fine. We make her write a check for the fence first. We turn her offensive into a defensive, and for people like her, there is nothing more shocking than having to pay for the damage they inflict. The legal cyclone had just arrived, and Elias had found an anchor. The emergency injunction hearing was set for 2 weeks later. The speed was deliberate. David Chen had leveraged the pending criminal charges and the immediate need for fence repair, a security issue, to leapfrog the slow, arduous path of civil discovery. This wasn't the $2.8 million trial. This was a $5,000 hearing designed to deliver a tactical blow. But to Elias, sitting rigid in the hard, cold chair of the courtroom lobby, it felt like the main event. Relax, Elias, David murmured, checking his watch. All we need to do is show the judge 2 things. 1, that she intentionally destroyed your property, and 2, that you need to fix it now. It's simple property damage backed by criminal complaint. This is a skirmish, not the war. Elias nodded, but his hands were clenched. The sheer brazenness of Carol's lawsuit had been a profound violation. Worse than the broken fence, he needed this small win for his sanity. Across the lobby, Carol Jenkins sat in a borrowed wheelchair, her bandaged leg propped up dramatically. She was dressed in a dark, mournful dress, clearly playing the role of the injured martyr. Her husband, Gary, looked even more miserable than before, a man dissolving under the pressure of his wife's litigation frenzy. Brenda Maxwell, Carol's attorney, approached David and Elias, radiating icy contempt. Mr. Chen, this injunction is a transparent stall tactic, Brenda hissed, her voice low and furious. We are discussing serious bodily injury. This is petty harassment. No, counselor, this is simple justice, David countered, not rising from his seat. Your client destroyed a barrier, and we are asking the court to compel its immediate repair. It's an issue of secure dwelling. My client should not have to pay to protect himself from the person who is currently suing him for millions. Settle the fence claim, and the injunction goes away. Carol leaned forward from her wheelchair. You think I'm going to pay for that spiteful piece of wood? I slipped because his deck is a death trap. We'll let the jury decide who owes who." Brenda quickly placed a restraining hand on Carol's shoulder, a warning in her eyes. "Let's keep this professional, Carol." She turned back to David. "I'll be moving for an immediate dismissal of your injunction on the grounds of frivolous litigation. And I'll be showing the video on a 70-inch screen to prove malice," David replied with a calm smile. The tension was suffocating as they were called into the courtroom. Judge Helena Reyes, no relation to the earlier police officer, a woman known for her no-nonsense efficiency and a gaze that could bore holes through deception, presided over the small, formal room. The court clerk set up a screen and projector to accommodate the video evidence David had insisted upon. David began his argument laying out the timeline, the long history of harassment, the physical destruction of the fence, the trespass, and the subsequent fall. He focused narrowly on the cost of the fence and the need for security. "Your Honor, we are simply asking the court to compel the respondent, Mrs. Jenkins, to immediately rectify the property damage she caused, which also constituted a clear criminal act. We have the video evidence proving the criminal mischief occurred moments before and entirely separate from the alleged tort." Brenda Maxwell, clearly uncomfortable fighting this small battle, rose to object, her voice sharp. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is attempting to prejudice the court by conflating a pending civil liability case, which involves catastrophic injury, with a minor property dispute. The fall is the issue, the deck is the issue, the fence is immaterial." "Sustained to an extent, Ms. Maxwell. I will not rule on the larger premises liability claim today," Judge Reyes said, her voice dry and steady. "But the property damage is material to the injunction. Mr. Chen, show the video." The lights dimmed. Elias held his breath. The video footage began. It was clear, high definition, and devastatingly objective. The timeline, stamped in the corner, ran seconds ahead. The camera focused on the corner of the fence. Scene 1. Carol appears, her face flushed with anger, grasping the rusty hedge trimmers. The snip of the trimmers against the wood was loud and shocking in the quiet courtroom. Scene 2. She uses her body weight to snap 2 cedar boards, ripping them free and tossing them carelessly onto Elias's deck. The moment of criminal mischief was undeniable. Scene 3. Elias walks out holding his phone. He immediately tells her to get off his property. Scene 4, the critical angle. Carol, completely focused on yelling at Elias, steps decisively onto the slick deck. She doesn't glance down. She isn't testing the surface. She is advancing an argument. Her left foot slides violently on the wet concrete. Her face registers shock, not pain, as her body twists and she drops, smashing her knee against the deck lip before plunging into the pool. The 20-second clip ended. The lights came up slowly. The room was silent. Carol, forgetting her pain, was staring at the blank screen, her face a ghastly shade of disbelief. She hadn't truly processed how the cameras had recorded her, not just falling but trespassing and attacking. Judge Reyes leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, her expression unreadable, until she looked directly at Carol. A slow, deeply ironic smile began to spread across the judge's face. It wasn't a judicial smile. It was a human reaction to a spectacle of self-inflicted disaster. "Ms. Maxwell," the judge began, her voice low and measured, but laced with profound disbelief. "Your client's primary argument in the larger suit, I presume, will hinge on the negligent maintenance of the pool deck leading to an unavoidable slip?" Brenda Maxwell, scrambling, replied, "Yes, Your Honor. The hazardous condition of the surface. Ms. Maxwell, this video clearly demonstrates that your client was not attempting to use the pool, not sunbathing, and not even using an alleged easement. She was engaging in felony criminal mischief, actively destroying private property with a weapon," the judge interjected, the ironic smile hardening into judicial scorn. She entered that property through a hole she herself just ripped open, not as a customer, not as a casual trespasser, but as a vandal. Furthermore, the video shows her attention was entirely focused on Mr. Vance and not on the ground, immediately prior to her fall. Judge Reyes then delivered the verdict on the injunction, the words cutting like ice. The court finds that the respondent, Carol Jenkins, engaged in deliberate and malicious destruction of private property. The evidence is conclusive. The need for immediate repair is a valid security concern. Therefore, I am granting the injunction. Ms. Jenkins will, within 10 calendar days, issue a certified check to Mr. Vance for the full cost of replacing the fence and associated security costs, totaling $6,250. Failure to comply will result in a finding of contempt of court and an immediate lien placed on her assets. She hammered the gavel down, the sound echoing through the stunned courtroom. But she wasn't done. She fixed her gaze on Brenda Maxwell, her expression now genuinely priceless, a blend of pity and exasperation. Counselor, I suggest you have a very serious conversation with your client about the viability of her $2.8 million claim. This footage does not paint the picture of an injured civilian. It paints the picture of a criminal whose injury was an act of profound, self-destructive irony. Carol's gasp was audible. The shock of being instantly compelled to pay before she could even collect hit her harder than her fall. Elias felt a deep cleansing rush of relief. The judge's reaction, that knowing, scornful smile, confirmed what he already knew. The truth on camera was undeniable. Carol's entitlement had just cost her the first round, and the judge had essentially declared her main lawsuit DOA.